Wednesday morning, and welcome to another edition of Council Matters with myself, Colin McStay. The local elections are fast approaching, only a couple of weeks away now as the canvassing heats up, and stay tuned later on because this Sunday we'll have the second of our panel shows in a series of panel shows focused around women candidates from different parties and philosophies. That'll be on at Sunday midday, so you'll hear more about that later on. But in studio today I'm joined by two prospective, one's a sitting councillor and one is wants to be a councillor from Fine Gael and Labour, Noel Rock, a young candidate from Fine Gael in Glasnevin, and Councillor Michael O'Sullivan of Labour in Crumlin-Kimmage. Welcome this morning, gentlemen.
Morning. Good morning, Colin. Just before you start, I am in Crumlin-Kimmage currently, but because the boundary changes,
you're going
to be for Ballyfarmers.
Ballyfarmers, okay.
Yeah.
We'll start with you, Noel. Can you tell us if you always wanted to be a political animal as such?
No, not really at all. Originally, I would have seen myself going towards journalism, but then I got involved in politics. I got involved in politics in the US in particular. I worked for Hillary Clinton for a while, and I got bitten by the bug, as people like to say. You know, I saw what a practical impact politicians can have on people's lives in terms of solving problems big and small. At the time I was working in the Senate office there, which would deal with a lot of things that actually, councils here deal with, believe it or not, in terms of footpath repair, road repair, tree trimming, lamppost repair, etc., etc. And I just thought, this is great. This is a real way of having tangible impact on people's lives. And so since then, I've been working in politics in Ireland, here in the Oireachtas, in Brussels, in the European Parliament, and now I'd like to put my knowledge and potentially maybe skills to good use, hopefully, for the people of Ballymun and Glasnevin.
I'm interested to know from your experience there, do councillors, can they push management? There's always tension between councillors and management into, as you say, better repairing on the footpaths, on the roads and transport, housing, more housing. Did you see that they had the power?
Well, from my perspective, and when I'm talking to people on doors, what I do say is I see the role of a councillor as helping empower people and helping them better navigate the services that are already there in effect. Now, if it's the case that the council sometimes aren't listening or are a bit tone deaf to a particular problem in an area, then certainly we try and make representations to try and force that issue, if you like, and try and push it forward with officialdom. But in effect, more often than not, people can do things like make representations about the footpaths, roads, trees, etc., etc. But they don't know how. So I think having someone called to the door is often the best way of doing that, and that is the role of a councillor in it.
Michael O'Sullivan, you spent 3 years, if I'm right, on the council. In those 3 years, what have you learned, or what surprised you before you went into becoming a councillor?
Let Noel into this. It's a much more demanding job than many people might think, and for those of us who have full-time jobs, it's quite demanding. The range of services and facilities the council are engaged in, the scale of some problems, like for example the housing problem, which has become a real crisis, the amount of things you can actually get done. You were talking there to Noel about this tussle between the manager and I think all councillors would feel that we need the powers to be, some of the powers to be restored. Having said that, there are ways about going about things. So in relation to, say, footpaths and so on, I've taken an approach of trying to take a more organic approach. I've worked with local disability groups to try and make it an issue in relation to things like access and accessibility, which actually affects everybody. If the paths are improved for people with disabilities, it's improved for everybody. In our local area, we have a project that's started now, which is to make Dublin 12, Dublin South Central, a gold standard for people with disability. That'll take some time, but it's a more organic way than simply just going along as you do. And sometimes sometimes things are put on a long finger. If you go to a council meeting and you say, or you put a question down to say there's a footpath on that road which is a trip hazard and will actually cost you money if you don't get it fixed, you can't get things done.
What do you think the general public, what side of a councillor's daily business that they don't see? And if they did see it, there'd be more. Maybe more people swing towards a positive view of councillors.
I take it at different levels. When we sit down for a council meeting or multi-council meeting, we have an agenda which often runs to 400 pages.
So it's webcasted as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's worth watching. And if people want to come and see
public
it,
transparency.
you can actually. It's a good thing. But anyway, at a council level, there's a whole thing about how we run the city. Decisions we make. For example, in the next 10 years, we're going to have 1,500 new kilometres of bicycle tracks. That happens because people make that a priority and there are loads of committee meetings and so on. All the councillors sit on engineering committees or policy committees generally. I'm on the engineering committee, which finds you're dealing with, we were dealing with water, we're dealing with a whole range of issues that affect people day and daily. Down from that, there's all the local committees that you go on. I chair the local drugs task force, which works really hard with really good groups locally who are trying to help our own children, because they're our own children who have drug abuse problems, and also we've been asked to look at the alcohol issue as well. So there's a whole range of issues, and then there's the individual, as Noel said, you're there to represent people. There's the individual representations you have to make to ensure that people get what they are entitled to. I think I always say to people, I can't get you something that you're not entitled to, but if you are entitled to it and you're finding it hard to get it, you need an advocate, and I do that for people.
Well, Fine Gael at the moment, they're obviously being a government party, they're always in the news, and we hear now about the water charges, rates and so on. As a prospective candidate for Fine Gael, are we taxed too much, or are we taxed just right, and the taxation it directly is worth it because it's a pain in the butt, but do you think it's worth it because it goes back to something?
I think Fine Gael and Labour were elected with two key priorities when it came to the national elections. You know, restore our public finances first of all, close that 12 billion chasm, and get people back to work again. Now, the job isn't done in either of those cases, but we're certainly making progress on it. You know, we've made 60,000 jobs this year. We've closed that budgetary gap by quite a bit. We've scaled 95% of the mountain at this stage, and the higher you go up, the steeper the mountain gets. So, you know, the water rates are coming in now. They've been announced. There's been a definite approach to try and make it fair for all. You're right when you say tax is a pain in the butt. And that's why, you know, Minister Noonan has said that we're going to be looking at band readjustments in the next budget, and that Labour certainly as a national platform and Fine Gael as a certainly a city council, Dublin City Council platform, have agreed to be looking at cuts in the property tax. Up to 15%, which is the maximum allowance that we can go to under current legislation. Because the nature of Dublin is that A, we have a very dense population, B, a high yield per house because the cost per house is quite high, and C, a high level of compliance relative to other parts of the country. So certainly it's something that could be afforded.
Will set rates, should set rates be applied to the property tax because Dublin is overvalued in the housing market? Should it be done on a per room basis or per...
I'm not sure if I'd agree with a per room basis necessarily. I would probably say that I don't agree with how the household tax is currently calculated, and I think that a site value tax, which was previously talked about, would have been a better way to go about it. I'm not sure per room though necessarily, because then you kind of get into a back and forth of is the room occupied?
Say acres or
but kind of a site value tax, I think that would have been a good way to go, particularly in terms of apartment owners, etc., and not penalising them too harshly.
Michael, as a member of the junior partner in this coalition, how do you view the government's performance in the area of tax and charging?
Well, look, as Noel said, we were elected to do, he said two things, I would say three things, was restore the finances, bridge the gap, and from our point of view, we had a difference with our partners in terms of the pace of that and how that would happen, and that was our bit contribution where we went in terms of, I think, the balance between tax and cuts for Fine Gael was 75-25, we were happier with a 50-50 split. It's come in somewhere around 60-40, which was, you know, what we said we would try and do, and I think we've managed to do it. Look, I think the issue about tax is, I don't know, people saw the 1977 Reading in the Years the other night, which I can remember when we did away with the household rates, and we did away with a lot of things, and we hollowed out our national tax raising budget. We need to restore that. To do that in a difficult time is difficult, but I think what people look for is fairness and that the taxes are spent well. I think we've got to go a little bit on fairness, because I would be in favour of more wealth and asset taxes. I think this current property tax does need to be amended, but I think a key issue for a lot of people is that if we are moving towards a sort of a local council tax, the local council raises money, it should have much more control about how that comes in, and then it should have absolute control over how that is spent. And at the moment we need to move towards
talking about amendment, I'd ask you, what is the fair starting rate, Michael, for property tax?
In terms of the percentage? Just again to remind people that the figure that was being discussed by Fianna Fáil and the Green Party when they actually negotiated this with the Troika was nearly three times what we actually have at the moment. I think the issue for me is not just the rate, it's actually to have a property tax that is actually related to the type of property people have, where it is. And Dublin City Council delivers very efficient services compared to other cities. So I think we should have the opportunity to set the rate ourselves, and we should have an opportunity then, as I said, to spend the money that we collect. There's a little bit needs to be done in terms of rebalancing. Smaller counties need some money.
Councillors vote,
Yeah, but I still think that should come from central government, and we locally should get the money, and then people should then hold us to account for how we spend that money.
And no,
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what Michael says there. It is going to be one of the most fundamental reforms of local government that's ever happened in the history of local government, whereby the council actually receives direct exchequer funding in that sense and has the ability to set taxation rates and then has the ability to spend those as well. So there will be a lot more of a focus in the future on accountability in terms of how people's money is spent, because the money will be going directly from the citizen in effect to the council, which has never happened before. Normally what happens is it goes from the citizen to general government, kind of, a slush if you like, and then it goes to the council, but you don't see the direct correlation between what goes out of your pocket and what goes into the council's coffers, whereas now you will, and now you'll be asking for more value for money. But I also agree with what Michael says insofar as we do need to make sure that we enshrine fairness in what we do from here on. We need to make sure that we enshrine fairness for householders and to make sure that people get value for money and don't feel abandoned by services either. Because while I'm in favour of cutting taxes, I'm certainly not in favour of cutting services.
the issues on the doorstep, what's the major issue?
A large issue right now, which is causing a lot of anxiety for people, and in some cases unnecessarily so, are the medical card reviews, I have to say. I've come across people, pardon me, night after night, who are saying to me, I've got this form, it's X pages long, it's very technically complicated for this person or this individual they're finding, and they're just worried that for that month period where they're under review, that they're going to lose the card. Now, in most instances, in about 95% of instances, that doesn't come to pass. They keep their card and it's fine. But it's the anxiety that's being caused where someone has a card that's valid until 2016, supposedly on the face of it, but is now having a review in April or May 2014. That's causing a little bit of uncertainty because they're wondering, why me, why now? And I suppose it's good that people like, councillors are there to walk them through the process, or to explain it to them, or at least to say that, if anything does come to pass that you think shouldn't, that we're here.
On the issue of medical cards, I think it is it's an important local issue, but why do the TDs get involved, and TDs from Fine Gael, for example, get involved in the medical card issue? Why don't they leave it to you guys?
I'm not really sure it's our job necessarily either, but that's not to pass the buck or anything like that. Certainly if it comes to my door, I deal with it. But Fine Gael doesn't have a TD in my area, so I kind of have to deal with it. I've no one to pass it to. But nevertheless, I do think this could have been much more elegantly handled, and I do think it's a symptom of bureaucracy not listening to people more so than anything else.
Michael, in Ballymun, what's the major issue?
I mean, those issues come up, and whatever happens nationally, you'll always get discussion. But in fact, I'm sort of surprised that actually it's much more local issues. I'm Ballyfarm at Drimna. I was in Crumlin, Cambridge, and my heartland would be Drimna. Walkinstown. No. But just explain that's where I would be. In Drimna and Walkinstown, particularly in Drimna, which is an old area, a huge issue for people is parking outside their house. I live beside the Children's Hospital. There's huge staff in the Children's Hospital, and the roads in Drimna were not made for people having the amount of cars, and certainly not for visitors having the amount of cars. So it's a very practical issue, and again there's been a sort of a piecemeal approach where people have been looking to put a yellow line outside their house or get the guards down to whatever, but practically every car in Drimna outside the house is illegal because it parks in the path, and guards actually ignore that. Because so again, what I've tried to do is we've recently set up a forum for parking in Drimna, parking and traffic, which will try to bring together city council staff, guards, other people, to try and come up with an actual tailored solution for older areas. I'm sure there's some of the north side as well, that actually aren't designed for the current rules on traffic. You cannot put in what's called disc parking on it because the roads are too narrow. So as I say, a lot of people think that it's all the national issues. For a councillor, our bread and butter is local stuff. if I could solve the issue of dog fouling, I would probably be directly elected Lord Mayor in Dublin today.
Or put up the warning signs.
I mean, it's an
money.
issue of attitude. It's an issue of trying to explain to people with dogs that this is really serious. Came across a woman recently with a child in a wheelchair and was explaining to me how difficult it is. That wheelchair goes over a bit of dog dirt, gets on the child's hands, they have to dismantle the wheelchair and so on. So actually, as I say, I'm very happy to talk about Labour's role in government on the doorsteps, and I think we need those with the Labour Party who took a difficult decision to go into it need to stand on the doors and explain to people, and it works okay. But as well as that, people are actually electing local councillors to do local jobs and to vote in city budgets, which is a thing I'm a bit anxious about. A lot of the councillors who are standing that haven't been in politics are people who won't vote for a city budget. And I think we need to be clear that the city councillors don't actually create and do a good budget and then pass it. There will be no council.
Yeah, I've noticed under the management of Owen Keegan we have these bicycle sites where you pick up a bicycle with the council logo, bring it back. There's one when I go down there beside the O2 Arena, that's the nearest one to the studios. Do you think that's an effective way of dealing with the car chaos, some would say, in our cities?
Oh yeah, hugely. I mean, Dublin Bikes has been an
Huge
unprecedented success.
Yeah. Of all the world's games, it's one of the most successful. And I was amazed to hear that there are more people who now travel to work on bicycle than by Lewis, which is incredible. And as I say, there's a plan there is a plan to have 1,500 kilometres more of bicycle lanes in the city, and I think that whole free bike scheme has helped to stimulate.
When we get the extra routes, I'll probably change. But yeah, it's impressive.
Absolutely. I was talking to Andrew Montague, who's one of the people who proposed the bike scheme last night, actually, at a debate in Ballymun, and he said to me that before there was a cycling working group set up in, I think, 2004, cycling had declined year on year on year in Dublin. But ever since then, it's increased every year, to the extent that from 2004 to 2014, the number of people cycling to work has actually doubled, which I think is very impressive.
And again, these are things that come about because the city councillors with the management sit down and make a plan for the city, and then vote for a budget that will deliver that. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about. What sort of vision of the city? We had at our local area meeting recently, we had a whole presentation of a plan which I would hope, if I get elected, to see through, which is the greening of the south inner city. So there's a whole lot of green space that are not accessible to people. Okay. So there's really impressive work being done that actually needs support.
Thinking as well, just with the Phoenix Park alone, you must be one of the most green space cities in Europe. On to the directly elected mayor, and it ties into a bit what you're saying about the capital budget, and it might be one power he or she has. I'll start with you, Michael. Oisín Quinn of Labour, Lord Mayor Oisín Quinn, is unashamed supporter of the idea. Now, recently, of course, Fingal decided that this wasn't the right time, or the majority of councillors of Fingal, for directly elected mayor. Is it the right way forward for Dublin City?
In principle, I think it is.
And county as well.
Dublin as a region.
As
really.
a region, yeah.
If you look around the world, you can see more and more that cities are becoming the hubs for economic investment and development in a country. So I think having a directly elected Lord Mayor is hugely important. But apart from that, we do need to then sort out how that actually works, and I think there's a lot of talk needs to happen about how that will actually work. But I think it's essential, and I think the powers that will go with that are essential. I also think there's reform needed down the line. I mean, we as local councillors now represent really large areas, and there's a role for I don't mean elected people or paid people, but there is a role for some more local sort of representation. If you go to France, every small village and town has a small council that puts up a thing in the up at the local shop saying this is what we're spending our money on and this is whatever. So I think a mixture of a directly elected Lord Mayor and then more accountable local politics. Some of that's coming in with some of the enhanced powers for local area committees, that people can actually engage directly with people who can do things for them. But I think it's the way to go, and I'm sorry that it was voted down by Fingal.
No.
Yeah, I was disappointed in Fingal County Council's vote on that issue. I think the overwhelming majority of councillors right across the 4 Dublin councils, if you take them numerically, voted in favour of it. I know Minister Hogan has said he will come back and look at the proposal again in the coming year. And I know from the youth wing of my party, we're fully behind the idea of a directly elected Dublin mayor. Can't emphasise that strongly enough. I think people get frustrated sometimes about the unaccountable aspects of having an unelected city manager in place. And I think people want to see somebody democratically elected that they can hold to account for the development or lack thereof of a city over the 5-year time.
You have some sympathy for Fingal. I don't know if you saw the webcast of that the day when they took the vote. They were saying, longer serving councillors are saying, well, we used to all be crammed into O'Connell Street as the 4 boroughs were as such, and you could never get much on the table for Fingal issues within that time frame, and they don't want to go back to those days, and that it wouldn't be the most pragmatic solution. Do you have sympathy for that?
I don't see how yesterday's problems should prevent tomorrow's progress. You know, it's regrettable, obviously, that they were crammed in those times, but now they have, their own chamber. It's not as though we'd be necessarily devolving all the powers of the councils back into one mega council necessarily. The directly elected mayor would have his or her own executive functions, all right, but nevertheless, each council would still have its own role to play. And I just think to not even allow the debate to happen and not even allow the people and the population to have their discussion on it, that was prohibitive for democracy, and I think it was something of a selfish move.
So an insider's vote.
Yeah, and as I said, there were 2 elements. There's the directly elected Lord Mayor, and then there is giving more powers and financial powers down the line to local area committees and local councils as well. So it wasn't an either-or situation. And as I say, and as Noel has said, we should have let. There was 2 years for debate after that, before we actually came up with the final proposal. This was to let the debate go ahead and give legal permission to do that.
I was talking to another candidate on the phone yesterday, and she said, how about a minister for Dublin affairs, because Dublin is obviously the most important city in the country.
Well, again, what you have then is you have it sat in central government, and who are not ministers for Dublin. They have responsibility for the country. I think there is an issue if there is a directly Lord Mayor, because that I think that's good for Dublin, which I think can be good for the rest of the country. But there is an issue about how that interfaces with the government. But I think sitting it in central government loses the energy behind all of that. And as Noel said, people need the opportunity to vote for a candidate who has a platform for a vision of the city. They won't get that with a minister for Dublin. And I wonder, would that minister for Dublin have to be from Dublin, or what way would that work?
Well, I think one of the Dublin constituencies would have a better daily say and daily knowledge of it. Who are the most vulnerable of the constituents in this election, do you think? I know you alluded to here, Michael, in the bit on your website. Who are the most vulnerable in our society?
There's a range of people who are always vulnerable because of medical conditions and other things. So we haven't had a brilliant track record in terms of mental health and other issues. But in terms of council services, I think the key thing, and the thing I think you asked me about 3 years in the council. After 3 years in the council, the most frustrating and I'd really say shameful thing is the provision of housing for people. I've gone from a situation where I have looked at housing that people have been in saying, gosh, this is terrible, how does this go on, to now saying to those people, look, you have a room you're living in. There are people now that I'm dealing with who are faced with being on the side of the road, and I think that is the biggest challenge we have. It's a challenge we can't solve on our own. We need central government. We have had some. I'm thankful there's been some move on that, but we need and we as councillors need to put the pressure on to make sure that there are resources. It's a supply problem. Unless we get that sorted out, we'll only be tinkering around with it.
And Noel, you represent a constituency where we had the tower blocks for years, and very much, which increased, I think, the isolation for those residents from the rest of the city. Those are now mostly, I think, consigned to the past. But who would you see now that would be a vulnerable group that needs more say and could get it through voices like yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, just when you mentioned the towers, Ballymun is obviously undergoing a period of huge transformation right now. But I would agree with Michael insofar as I think the homelessness situation in Dublin is one that is coming up constantly. We have people living in hotel accommodation night after night, some of whom I've talked to. And they're fortunate in a way relative to others who are on the streets then, night after night. We have a dreadful situation where housing isn't being created at a fast enough rate. In 2007 we had 7,000 houses built. In 2013 I think it was somewhere around 350 houses, Michael. And that's no one individual's fault. I think everything is being done within the parameters that possibly can. But
can a social housing plan be put in place?
That's the thing. We do need central government to do one of a number of things, but one thing I would say that they should do is to allow councils to borrow money or issue bonds to create this social housing. Dublin City Council is in a position where they could definitely do that if central government untied the handcuffs and let them go and do it. So they should issue maybe a €500 million, €1 billion bond, which would allow social housing to be kick-started right now, because it's the problem that we need a solution to start right now. If we say it's going to start halfway through the next term of City Council, that's going to be 2018, 2019 before it's actually realised. And this is a very urgent problem.
So action over talk.
Absolutely.
Finally, how do you rate your chances in these different constituencies?
Who knows? I'm happy that I can go indoors and say to people I've worked hard and I've done some things. I have a challenge in that my constituency, I worked in Crumlin, Cambridge, and the Crumlin part of it has all gone, and I've now got the whole areas of Cherry Orchard, Chapel Izzard, Ballyfarmish, which are huge areas in themselves, and that's a particular problem. So that's my challenge.
You're positive, yeah.
Yeah, but I am positive. I'm getting a good response in the doors.
And no, quickly.
Yeah, I'm a brand new candidate, you know. I mean, I've been working in the community at Ballymun and Glasnevin for 2 years now, so I'm running on a track record. People know what I'm about, but they also know I'm a brand new face, and that's what people want to see.
To face us in here today, and you've listened to them, Noel Rock and Michael O'Sullivan. Thank you.